What's up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 92, Barboza versus Murphy. Before we even jump into it, for those of you that need be, hit your 5-5-5, 5 inhale, 5 hold, 5 exhale, especially for some of you guys that are very tensed up that like to jump into the comment section with your rude comments there. Hit it up if need be, because we are settling in for this card. Edson Barboza, who is in the main event. He's the number 11th ranked featherweight fighter. Besides that, you're not going to see ranked fighters throughout this card. You're not going to see a lot of huge names, but there are some promising fighters, some fighters that have been putting in some solid work as of recently. Carlston Harris comes off a huge victory and seems to have regained some of that initial momentum that he had when he was coming into his UFC debut. Some people were kind of high on him. Themba Gorimbo has now put a little win streak together, coming off a very impressive victory as he takes on Ramiz Brahimaj, a fighter that's been away from the game for a while. So that's an interesting fight there. Adrian Yanez, a once very hyped up fighter in the division. You guys know we had him on MMA Live Discussion. We did a live interview with him. He has really been going through some trouble, so trying to right the ship there is Yanez. Nolan had a disastrous UFC debut, another fighter that's trying to right his ship here in his second UFC fight. So, you know, just there's some fun matchups throughout the card. We're happy to have some UFC fights to talk about. And let me just also note this fighter, Oumar Asai. This is a fighter we will be talking about here in a little bit. This is a talented a fighter with a lot of potential. He'll be taking on Antonio Trócoli, a fighter that we saw fight on Dana White's Contender Series a while ago, kind of a dangerous BJJ fighter, and we'll be talking about this fighter Sai here in a second. I think he has some legitimate potential as he is now an addition to the light heavyweight division of the UFC here. All right, guys, so listen, if you can, before we jump into this first fight, if you can, just hit the like button for me. It really does mean a lot to me. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and go follow me on my social media. It means the world to me, guys, if you guys could do that. I know you always hear me preaching it, but it really does mean the world to me, and you guys will continue to hear me say that. And if you have done that for me already, I appreciate you very much. And just note, we are powered by BetUS. If you guys sign up through the link in the description of this video, you will get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. And if you guys do sign up through that link, let me know so I could send you guys a gift. All right, guys, with that being said, we're about to talk some fight action. The first fight will be Emily Ducote taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. Let's go slide over to that fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
In the women's strawweight division, we have Emily Ducote taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. If you don't already know, one of these fighters is quite the favorite. And I don't know if you guys are in agreement, but I do find it somewhat questionable where this line is. And I'll tell you guys why I feel that's the case. If you don't already know, Ducote is the hefty favorite in this matchup against Vanessa Demopoulos, who Demopoulos is actually 4-1 in her last 5 fights. I know we can kind of dissect some of those victories, but first and foremost, she's coming off a victory over Kanako Murata, which, if you didn't know, Murata actually has a victory over Emily Ducote. That fight took place some years ago, but a common opponent where Demopoulos has a win, Ducote has a loss. Besides that, you know, if we want to kind of dissect some of these victories, you know, the Murata, I'm not really too high on that Murata victory. Maria Oliveira, Jinyu Frey, Silvana Gomez Juarez, I'm not really high on any of the recent W's she's been getting in the cage. And also the Silvana fight, she got tagged brutally. She was dropped and she was able to pull that armbar off her back. But in that fight, she showcased one of the major deficiencies in her game, and that is her striking defense. And we've seen that throughout the years before she even ever made it to the UFC. If you remember the Lupi Garinez fight, which was a 5-rounder for the belt over in the LFA, she was just leading with her face the entire time. She's extremely tough, but she takes so much damage. It's not going to look good when it goes to the judges' scorecards. She really has thrived for the most part off her BJJ and I would say her toughness, right? This is a chick that is tough. She'll march forward, like I said. She'll eat shots, but she'll look to throw on you as well. And if the opposition's not really willing to participate in a dogfight, she can kind of impose her will a little bit there. But Emily Ducote, I do believe, she is the more talented striker here. I think she's a more polished fighter, especially on the feet, where this fight is most likely going to stay. Ducote has showcased good takedown defense in the UFC so far. If there's one alarming performance, I mean, if you go back quite a bit, if you remember her loss to McFarlane, former Bellator champion, she was subbed in the 5th round. She was put on her back a little bit there. If Demopoulos was able to get this fight down to the mat, I think that she could have success with her jiu-jitsu. I'm just not sold on Demopoulos' wrestling and ability to get the fight down to the mat. Maybe she could kind of pull guard or something like that and pull something off like that, but good luck with all that. A fight that I do want to note as well, if you haven't seen her performance against Danielle Taylor, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that. That was a beautiful first round knockout that she had, showcasing some of the dangerous striking skills she possesses. So one other thing I do want to note as well, which some of the reasons why I say this line is alarming, when you take a look at Ducote's UFC debut against Jessica Penne, she looked phenomenal in that fight, right? I was very high on her after that fight. I think we all were. And then I was there live for her fight against Angela Hill, and she completely shit the bed. She froze up. So you do have some questions about her mental game. Although I will say I like the way she bounced back. Even in the next fight where she took a loss against Lupe Garines, I thought that she actually... I'm very familiar with that fight. I had an 8-unit max play in Lupi, and actually Ducote brought the fight and was battling to the very end there against a very, very talented Garines. So a better version of Garines, even compared to when Demopoulos faced her earlier on in her career. And then she had another victory over Ashley Yoder. So there's some question marks into Ducote's game. And do you want to tag a minus 350 line on her? I mean, that's a big favorite. If Demopoulos can make this an ugly dogfight, and if Ducote freezes up a little bit like she did in the Hill fight, the fight has the potential to play out closely. All in all, though, I'll be clear, it's a high line, but I do see Ducote landing big shots. I see her bloodying Demopoulos up, and I actually think there's even a possibility with the way that Demopoulos eats those shots. I think that if Ducote is really on her P's and Q's, she can drop Demopoulos. She could hurt her bad in this fight, potentially even getting a finish. If she plays it smart, she should know not to follow Demopoulos down to the mat like Silvana did and end up finding herself in an armbar or something like that. She should be patient, look to land her big shots and get a knockout or just do damage throughout this fight and outpoint Demopoulos. And that's how I see this fight going. I will say Emily Ducote wins a decision victory over Vanessa Demopoulos. Over to the men's bantamweight division, we got Haley Alateng taking on Kleydson Rodrigues. Rodrigues brushing shoulders with the legend Charles Du Bronx. That's always a good sign. Training over at Shootbox. Another thing going for Kleydson here is Kleidson's the younger fighter, still has a much higher ceiling at this point than an Alateng. And Alateng is proven to be a UFC caliber fighter, I would say. I mean, he's done his thing. Even when you take a look at his losses, it's against high level competition in the UFC. You take a look at his losses before he made it to the UFC. Some of them are questionable, but he's put it together. Losses to Chris Gutierrez and Casey Kenny, which Casey Kenny, very good fighter, just for some reason disappeared from the game. But victories over Chad Enhellinger, knocked out Kevin Kroom, went to a draw with Gustavo Lopez in his UFC debut, had a decision victory over Dana Baccarel, victory over Ryan Benoit. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to put your finger on an Alateng because his victories are over lower level fighters and his losses are against high level competition. He's a well-rounded fighter. He will show up and he'll be technically sound for the most part anywhere the fight goes, but doesn't really do anything specifically that good. And his volume is not the greatest. I will say that too. His volume's not the greatest. That's one thing that worries me a little bit. If Alateng is going to have success in this fight, I think he needs to use the clinch, kind of slow the fight down a little bit and kind of dictate the pace of this fight. We saw in Kleidson's fight against CJ Vergara, that type of tactic did cost him. Vergara actually had almost an entire round of control time on him, was pushing him up against the cage a little bit, just kind of frustrating him. I do like the way he bounced back with that knockout victory over Shannon Ross, but Shannon Ross is a fighter that's been getting knocked out by everybody, so how much merit do we put into that? Then he gets submitted by Farid Basharat, which Basharat, you guys know I'm very high on him too, so it's kind of hard to gauge that. And let me also just note the victory he had on Dana White's Contender Series over Santo Caratolo, who was undefeated at the time, and I thought that Kleydson looked really good in that fight. So quite a bit of question marks going into this matchup here. I will say this though. The same thing that I stated as we jumped into this fight here. The ceiling on Kleydson Rodrigues is much higher. He's still just 28 years old. There's a lot more room for growth. I think we very much know what we're getting with Alateng. I would say I'm going to put a little bit of faith into Kleydson Rodrigues kind of continuing to sharpening up his skill set. Just 11 pro fights as well. I like who he's surrounding himself with. I think he'll have a speed advantage here. And like I said, Alateng's volume is not the best at times. In fact, he's showcasing 2.88 strikes. Excuse me, he's posted 2.88 strikes landed per minute compared to 5.48 of Kleydson, while also absorbing 5.03 compared to Kleidson's 2.75. Limited amount of fights to go off of, especially in Kleidson's case. But Alateng, his numbers, I mean, there's actually a decent amount of fights to go off for him. So I'm going to say Kleydson Rodrigues shows up here, and that he has a speed advantage in this fight, and he will be a step ahead here. I'm going to take Kleydson Rodrigues by a decision. He is currently a minus 145 on BetUS, opened up as a minus 155. We see action going the other way very slightly, and I understand that because, like I said, I'm not really completely sold one way or the other. I think this is a close fight. I give it slightly into Kleydson. I wouldn't be surprised if Kleydson even comes down to like minus 135. I think that some people think that there's a possibility that Alateng shows up here and makes this a very close fight, and why not jump on some dog value there? This is a fight that I probably will not be targeting to bet. In the women's strawweight division, we got Piera Rodrigues taking on Ariane Carnelossi. Carnelossi stepping back into the octagon to spend about 2 years. Well, on the other hand, we can't really say P-Rod has been extremely active. She hasn't fought in about a year. She's been out for about a year as well. So both fighters 31 years old. I think this was some solid matchmaking by the UFC here. I like this matchup. Ariane Carnelossi, you think about some of the work that she did in the octagon back when she was performing, comes off a loss, a decision loss against Lupe Martinez, who I already mentioned earlier. I am very high on her. Victories over Estela Nunez. She submitted Estela Nunez, who Nunez was coming off a very long layoff in that fight. And I believe that was actually the only submission victory that Carnelossi has ever had. Finished Na Liang. I think that we all know anybody can finish Na Liang, so don't put too much stock into that. Even though she does have some knockouts on her resume early on in her career. Finished Ketlin Souza, a fighter that we just saw get her first victory in the octagon. She was actually finished by Angela Hill in between those fights as well. So both of her losses coming by way of high caliber opponents in the UFC. And it's kind of hard. This is another fighter where it's kind of hard to really put your finger on their ability, okay? And Piera Rodrigues is a fighter you could almost say the same thing. I mean, I think that she's definitely shown some flashes. I thought she looked very good on Dana White's Contender Series, where she was way ahead, a big step ahead against her opponent Machado. Came into the UFC, took out Kay Hansen. If you guys don't know Kay Hansen, maybe go take a look. But Kay Hansen, a BJJ black belt who parted ways with the UFC, but she's still very young, and I think she's looking to eventually make a run back in the UFC. But then defeated Sam Hughes, and then was submitted by Jillian Robertson, which Jillian Robertson, I do hold her in pretty high regards. I think she's a talented fighter, especially down on the mat. Jillian Robertson's going to be a different type of fighter in those grappling exchanges compared to these two. So who's going to be a step ahead in this spot here? I will say this. I think that I've liked a little bit more what I've seen from P-Rod. Some of the flashes she's shown, I've liked a little bit more. Carnelossi lacking a little bit defensively at times. She does eat shots, and I could see P-Rod being a little bit more fluid overall. Really overall, anywhere the fight goes, I could see her being a little bit more fluid, a little bit more athletic, and just kind of landing the marker a little bit more so. Even on the mat, I've liked some of what I've seen from her with her BJJ at times. But I do have this fight as a pretty close fight. Okay, I wouldn't be shocked here if, with the 2-year layoff, if Carnelossi was really putting in work and continuing to sharpen her craft. I would not be shocked at all here if Carnelossi has a nice comeback performance. And maybe she could use some of those muscles to rip Piera down and get in top control and land some ground and pound or something like that, or land a big shot on the feet. She has decent power, maybe not as much power as you would think though with all these big muscles she has. But we'll take a look at the betting line now. You could probably tell I'm not necessarily in agreement here. So Piera Rodrigues opened up as a -190. She's now a -185 on BetUS. All right, she's about a 2-1 favorite, just under a 2-1 favorite, and I think that's a risky take there. That's a risky bet. P-Rod's been away for about a year as well, coming off that loss. Yes, I have P-Rod winning a decision here. I think that she wins a decision here, like I said, just kind of outlanding Carnelossi, just being a little bit more fluid with her movement. But we'll see how this one plays out. Could be some potential dog value on Carnelossi. Give me P-Rod, though, to win a decision here. Abbas Magomedov taking on Warlley Alves in the middleweight division. Abbas Magomedov, let's talk about him first and foremost. He does come into this fight on a 2-fight losing skid. This is a huge fight for him. Obviously, does not want to go on a 3-fight losing skid, but do understand that his losses come against Caio Borralho and Sean Strickland. Okay, Sean Strickland eventually wins the championship after that loss, or after he gave Abbas that loss. Caio is a fighter that is one of the top dudes in the division right now. I mean, this guy's a problem, Caio. So before that, he had his UFC debut against Dustin Stoltzfus, gets that finish in 19 seconds. A great way to make a debut. This guy has the physique. He's a well-rounded fighter, and people, after that victory, people were really keeping an eye on him. I mean, for someone to make a debut like that and just to instantly get thrown into a main event spot, I mean, people obviously had high hopes for him. Remember, he was putting in work over at the PFL, made his way all the way to the tournament final against Lewis Taylor, where he was knocked out. But before that, had a nice victory over Sadibou Sai. That's a different Sai compared to the fighter we'll be talking about in a little bit, who I preferenced in the intro to this video. But another dangerous fighter. So I do believe that Abbas is a proven fighter. He's a dangerous fighter. He's not some type of fluke that just came in and made a quick knockout in his UFC debut and was just overhyped. I do believe he's a dangerous fighter. He does have some serious tools. I mean, he has a 78-inch wingspan. He'll have a 6-inch reach advantage here. He's a well-rounded fighter. Even in the fight against Sean Strickland in that first round, I mean, he was landing some damaging shots on Sean. But I will say that I do feel Strickland was kind of rope-a-doping him a little bit. But still, you see the tools that he has. He's a dangerous fighter. You see him. He's been getting some work over at American Top Team leading up to this fight. That could be a very good thing for him here. I mean, if he has his head on and he's fully prepared, I think that this is a fight he should be able to go out and take. Warlley Alves, on the other hand, he really has not had his head on his shoulders throughout the last couple of years. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, was knocked out in 2 of those fights. And the Jeremiah Wells knockout really didn't age that well. Because, yeah, Jeremiah Wells does knock dudes out occasionally, but we've seen that he kind of just throws out these wild, heavy shots. And if you're a little bit more technically sound and you're kind of on your P's and Q's, you should not be getting tagged by those shots. And you should be able to weather the storm and kind of drag Wells into the deep waters, as we've seen recently. But the Ikram Aliskerov loss, I mean, Ikram is a promising fighter, so take that for what you will. Submitted by Randy Brown, knocked out by James Krause. I mean, if you want to go back to his early fights, I mean, of course, everybody always wants to talk about that guillotine choke he caught Colby Covington in. Okay, that was a long time ago. That was in 2015. That was a completely different version of Colby Covington, and I don't put too much stock into that. These days, Warlley's a fighter that's just not looking great physically. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sold on him, and I'm not really sold on his mental game. I think that we could see him working his way out of the UFC. I mean, if he loses this fight, it may be the last time we see him there. He does carry some power, and if I want to play devil's advocate, one thing I would be a little bit worried about is if Warlley did show up and he had good conditioning going into this fight, if this pace has a high pace to it, maybe Abbas slows down and Warlley could have some success late. Also, Warlley does throw some heavy strikes. He's a little wild. He throws some heavy strikes, and maybe he can clip Abbas with the shot, right? We've seen Abbas knocked out before in some fights early on as well. So if you want to play devil's advocate, you can go that route. All in all, I will say I believe this is Abbas Magomedov's fight to take here. I think that he's coming into this fight more prepared, more mentally sharp, more hungry. It's just, kind of just looking into these fighters, I feel that that's going to be the case, and I like the tools that Abbas has, and I will take him to win this fight, and I would not be surprised if he gets a first round finish. Actually, I'm going to say he lands the mark and gets a first round finish in this fight. Maybe not even a first round, maybe it goes to the second round, but still an earlier finish. I'm thinking an under 1.5 rounds in this fight. I'm thinking Alves gets the finish at the most within the second round, first or second round. Okay, so right now, Magomedov is a minus 303. Basically, he's a minus 300. He's a 3-1 favorite. It's a pretty heavy line when you take into consideration this is a middleweight fight with some dudes that slang, and they slang heat. Like I said, Warlley does throw heavy shots and does have some sub skills, and they potentially could clash. It can get ugly, and maybe we see either man fall. So to chalk up minus 300, I'm not crazy about that. But I do like Alves Magomedov to get a knockout / TKO finish in this fight early on. Tamires Vidal taking on Melissa Gatto in the women's bantamweight division. Tamires Vidal, I'll cut to the chase on her. I'll make this one a little bit quicker than some of the other fights. Comes off a pretty sloppy loss to Montserrat Rendon. Before that, she had her UFC debut where she landed that nice knee on Ramona Pascual. Ramona Pascual, not a UFC caliber fighter, a very low level opponent there. So even though Vidal had a spectacular debut, if you will, I think that when you actually analyze that victory and then you take a look at how she performed in her following fight, I think we have a much better perspective of the fighter she is. I'm not too high on her. Still very young, just 25 years old. But when you dive into the tape, I feel pretty confident saying that Melissa Gatto is the much more talented fighter, much more polished. She's better anywhere this fight will go. I like what I've seen from her down at the mat at times. She has nasty jiu-jitsu. Don't let the fact that she was controlled by Tracy Cortez quite a bit in that fight stir you away from believing she has some good grappling skills, because she does. Tracy Cortez has above average grappling and well above average wrestling for her division. So and then she lost her last fight to Ariane Lipski. I'm going to keep calling Ariane Lipski. I know she changed her last name. She'll always be Lipski to us, right? Lipski's a talented fighter. Went to a decision with her, and that fight was actually closer than maybe some of you guys remember. If you rewatch the tape on it, Gatto had moments where she landed. In fact, Gatto overall actually outlanded Lipski in that fight, but Lipski had a good fight, though. She landed some more impactful shots and whatnot, but Gatto has a nice little in and out type of movement with, and I like Gatto's footwork. She's a fighter that's comfortable fighting on the back foot. If Vidal is going to try to pressure her, that's not necessarily a bad thing for Gatto. We've seen Gatto kind of working with her back along the cage, circling and choosing her moments to come in and land accurately. Okay, she's not a fighter that really has super crisp boxing. She's not throwing her strikes right down the pipe, but she makes it work for herself. She throws kind of these loopy shots. They land, and they have a little bit of zest on them too. You take a look at her frame. She's wiry, but she's pretty muscular, and we've seen her whip some torque into her shots. Of course, we have to mention the finish that she had over Sijara Eubanks. That was her last victory in the cage, where she had that third round finish, even throwing some nasty kicks as well. So I think that she'll have more power in her shots. I think she'll really be better anywhere this fight goes, barring she doesn't make a mistake and shoot some type of sloppy takedown, which I don't see happening, and Vidal times a knee. I feel pretty comfortable saying that Gatto is a step ahead, and this will be a nice bounce back victory for her, a much needed victory. Of course, she doesn't want to go on a 3-fight losing skid, and I hope she does get this W here, because she's a fighter that's a UFC caliber fighter and looks to be in really good shape coming into this fight here. So right now, Gatto is a minus 350 over at BetUS. She's quite the favorite, a 3.5 to 1 favorite in this spot here. I know what you guys are thinking. Maybe I'm going to say I'm not really crazy about the value on a women's fight like this, where, if you got a fighter in Gatto who's coming off 2 losses, but that's not really the proper picture. That wouldn't be an accurately painted picture here. Those, like we said, we dissected those losses. I think that Gatto, this is a pretty safe fight for her. And I think that the line's very accurate, actually. I do. I think that she gets the job done. Does she find a finish? Maybe that's the question we could talk about. But Tamires Vidal was subbed in one of her 2 losses. It was not her last. It was actually back to Carol Rosa back in 2019. And also note, Gatto has a victory over Carol Rosa. That was her last fight before she made it to the UFC, which Carol Rosa, decent fighter there, so a little common opponent, kind of understanding the different levels these fighters are on. Can she find the finish? Yes, she can. She can definitely find the finish. I wouldn't sit here and bank on Gatto to find that finish. She can, though. In fact, she's finished all of her documented victories. She's had 2 knockouts, 2 subs, and her 8 victories. The other 4 are unknown. She probably did find finishes in those, though. So she may find a finish in this fight. Maybe a late finish, but maybe Gatto via decision. We got 2 UFC debutants here. And I don't know if that's a legit term, debutants, but I'm definitely going to be saying that all the time now. It kind of has like an X-Men vibe to it, like a mutant or something like that, but a debutant. And you guys know what that means. It's a fighter making his UFC debut. All right, so 2 UFC debutants here. Oumar Sy taking on Antonio Trócoli. Trócoli had that victory on Dana White's Contender Series and looked phenomenal in it. Went out there, got a quick submission over Kenneth Berg. Kenneth Berg was the favorite in that fight too, so Trócoli was a dog. Went out there, made quick work of him. But there's a major asterisk next to that victory, as he did test positive for nandrolone, which is a pretty serious steroid from what I've read up and whatnot. Don't ask me to tell you too much about the roids, because Teller, not like Randy Couture, where he has the name The Natural, and he's obviously on all types of stuff. The Teller has been natural throughout his entire life. That is 100% fact. I'm a very natural dude, so just throw that at you guys real quick. But from what I've read up, I've heard nandrolone is a pretty serious substance. So that is something that you have to note when we're talking Trócoli. Bounced back with another submission victory after that, after parting ways with the UFC. The UFC initially gave him that contract after the victory, but they do part ways with him. I think he had some visa issues as well. He was supposed to be taking on Ovince Prue, and that fell apart. But he's 33 years old now. I think he was actually dating Mackenzie Dern, I believe. I think he was dating Mackenzie Dern for a little bit. So if you're kind of familiar with his face and whatnot. We'll get back to him in a second, but I want to talk about this dude, Oumar Sy, who looks great on tape. I really enjoyed breaking down tape on him. I think that he has the ability to instantly be a threat to this division. He's extremely well-rounded for a fighter that doesn't have a lot of pro experience, and for a fighter that I believe got into the MMA game a little bit late. Check this out. You see him over here. It's pretty cool. Let me give this MMA thing a try. You see him on the scooter smoking a stove and whatnot. Next thing you know, he's going out there chopping dudes down. He's a natural. And the thing that you have to like about him is that, yes, he's a dangerous striker, can go out there and finish you like that, but this is a fighter he's picked up the grappling very well. Now, we could dive into the level of competition and whatnot, but I've seen him down on the mat, pulling some beautiful sweeps and just really making things look nice down on the mat. All right. And he's not scared to go down there. Right. He flows. That's what I like about him. He flows. He's looking to take your head off. And then if you want to push the grappling, he welcomes that. Go ahead, try to take him down. He'll use your energy and your momentum. He'll reverse you over, and he just flows. And I like what I've seen from him. Now, like I said, though, there was some fights where he was welcoming the grappling, and if I were to play devil's advocate here, if I think he could run into some trouble, it would be by him just feeling comfortable going anywhere this fight goes and feeling comfortable that he can go down to the mat with Trócoli. If he does do that, I think that there is potential that Trócoli can catch him in something, or Trócoli can have the better jiu-jitsu and eventually make Sy pay there. I want to see more from Sy to really have much faith from him down there. You know what I'm saying? He's 9-0, 9 pro victories. That could be a specific avenue for him to run into some trouble. One of those fights I think I was referring to actually was the Henrique da Silva fight, which Henrique da Silva fought on Dana White's Contender Series, I believe, as well. He had a big fight on Dana White's Contender Series. He lost. I'm trying to remember who he fought, but anyways, a recognizable fighter there. He eventually caught him in a sub down on the mat. Not a lot of big names fighting over on the European scene, fighting over in KSW and Aries and whatnot, but I'll be clear here. I think that he's legit. I think he's going to be hanging around in the UFC for some time. 28 years old. Wait till this dude's 31, 32. I think he's going to be a fighter that we're going to be talking about for some time. Antonio Trócoli, not sold on his striking. So I think that Sy has a nice advantage there. And all in all, I am on the Sy side of things. I think that Sy could potentially get a knockout in this fight. just potentially get a finish in one way or another. Now, Trócoli's never been subbed. That would be a big feather in Sai's cap. I think the TKO is more likely, but Sai has shown some diversity with his finishing abilities, and I like Oumar Sai to get the job done here. Now, interesting line movement here. Oumar Sai opens up as a -350 favorite. He's now a -270. Action coming the other way, which if you're liking Sai, you're sitting back and you're watching this line marinate. Maybe you can grab a better line on it. Maybe he continues to dip. Maybe you can catch him at 230, something like that, 220. I think that'd be a bargain. But I do believe the reason why we see action coming in on Trócoli is people are looking into his grappling ability, and I think that they think that it's a legit threat here. I do believe that. I think that people are understanding that this fight has a likelihood to eventually go down to the mat at some point in time, because Sai he welcomes that in a way, and Trócoli's dangerous down there. With that being said, I do like Sai to find a finish. It's probably going to be the TKO. I like Sai. I think, like I said, I think he's the real deal. I think he shows up here in his debut, and we'll be watching him as he progresses in this division.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
We got 2 Dana White's Contender Series products here, who then make their UFC debuts, and both have atrocious UFC debuts. Tom Nolan was the more highly thought of fighter coming into his debut, as he had a spectacular performance on DWCS, went out there and knocked out Bogdan Grad. That was the Austrian fighter, I believe, the Austrian fighter who was talking a big game. That was a fight that was really hyped up. If you remember the stare downs the day before, and just the way that they clashed in that fight. I mean, Tom Nolan, he's still just 24 years old with this crazy frame for the division. The striking was looking good. He seems to be well-rounded. It seemed to be like one of the next big things working their way into the UFC, but then he completely gets derailed by Nicholas Moda, gets cracked within a minute of his debut, gets finished up there. So, I mean, it seems the UFC still has faith in him at just 24 years old. They're kind of investing in him by giving him Victor Martinez, who comes off an even worse loss, in my opinion, because it's one thing to lose to the Monkey King Jordan Levitt, but to get finished by him via strikes, the way that Levitt went out there, hit him with the knees and finished him up, that was a way worse look in my opinion, because at least Mota as a fighter we know can crack. Okay, so that was really just an atrocious UFC debut for Martinez, and it's kind of hard to ever forgive him for that performance, if you ask me. And if you're going to tell me that the Monkey King can go out there and stop him the way that he just stopped him in the first round, I mean, what is a Tom Nolan going to do to him if Tom Nolan comes into this fight with his head on his shoulders and is defensively sound and kind of methodical with his attack? I mean, you would definitely expect that Nolan is going to break him down and get a finish here. Okay, he has crazy length. He'll have a nice reach advantage here, about a 3-inch reach advantage, but he's also about 7 inches taller. Okay, so he has length in his legs to use if he wants to just attack from the outside and just set up that finish that he should be able to find here. Out of his 6 victories, 4 of them via knockout. Limited amount of fight tape and limited amount of fights to go off of, but dude looked good on DWCS, and I'm not willing to turn my back on him. I think that he just made a big mistake against Mota, and he'll learn from that. And I think he goes out here and he finishes Victor Martinez. I do. I think he finishes Victor Martinez, and I'll say he finishes him in the first round. I got Tom Nolan via first round knockout. Now, Tom Nolan is a big favorite here. Tom Nolan right now is a -435, opened up as a -450. He's quite the favorite, and you could be a little skeptical on that line just based on the way that he looked in his UFC debut, right, against Mota. What happens if he kind of doesn't show up and make some mental mistakes and some defensive mistakes, and all of a sudden Martinez cracks him with the shot? Because let's not forget, if you want to play devil's advocate real quick, Martinez has his share of knockout victories as well. 8 KOs out of his 13 victories, 8 of them have been by KO. On the regional scene, he's been going out there landing some heavy shots, okay? which is why I'll be honest, at the time I thought he was going to be able to have some success against Jordan Levitt on the feet. I was more worried about Levitt grappling him, but I thought Victor Martinez has shown some flashes with his striking, but I just have no faith in him, and I think that Tom Nolan is gonna steamroll him. I do. Now, do you want to take a line like that? I mean, maybe we'll talk. I'm sure we will be talking more about this fight on the prop edition video that we will be doing later in the week. But I think Tom Nolan finds an early finish in this fight, and I would try to find a better line. Maybe just taking a first round knockout or something like that. We got to monitor some of those lines, or potentially. You man up and you throw Nolan in a 2-team parlay, and you put some faith in him, because oh boy, does Victor Martinez's stock look just really, really bad right now. His stock is so low, and rightfully so. In the women's strawweight division, we have the never-aging Angela Hill taking on Luana Pinheiro, who Luana comes off a tough loss where she was finished up in the 3rd round against Amanda Ribas, and that was really her first loss in a long time. The other loss came very early on in her career. I mean, she was on quite a winning streak, was looking good in the UFC, knocked out Randa Marcos in her UFC debut after getting a knockout on Dana White's Contender Series against Stephanie Frosto. Victories over Michelle Waterson, Sam Hughes, and then Ribas, man, really pumping the brakes on Pinheiro there. Now, the thing I didn't like about Pinheiro in that fight is the longer the fight was going on, I feel that she gets a little shaky. On the other hand, Angela Hill is a fighter that she's clocked in for as long as the fight is scheduled for. She's clocked in for 15 minutes or 25 minutes. She could push the pace. We've seen her really go to war with some high-level fighters, right? We've seen her in some solid fights. She went 25 minutes with Mackenzie Dern. Now, that wasn't one of her good showcasings, which, in fact, that fight still has me scratching my head quite a bit, but don't know how Angela Hill did not get that fight, but she just didn't show up that night. But the way she bounced back with the victory over Denise Gomes in her last fight, who I'm pretty high on Gomes, that shows you that she's mentally still there. Looked great against Emily Ducote, who we just talked about, to kick this card off. She looked phenomenal in that fight. I was there live for it. Victory over Lupi Garinez. Not a lot of fighters can say they've went out there and got a W over Garinez. And you take a look at her losses. A lot of her losses coming by way of respectable names: Amanda Lemos, Verna Jandiroba, Tisha Torres, Michelle Waterson, which a lot of people felt that she should have won these fights. That was one of the fights I was talking about where she went to war for 25 minutes. Let's be honest, I was happy Waterson won at the time of that fight when I was watching it. Probably had a little bit of money on her or whatever. Angela Hill won that fight. She looked really good in that fight. A lot of people had her winning against Claudia Gadelha. Okay, so she's gone to a decision with Shannon Yan. She's been in there with just a lot of respectable names, man. She's been in there with them all. I think that she's still mentally obsessed with this game. You have to look at a fighter like Angela Hill and you have to tip your hat. This is a fighter that is just so devoted to the fight game. To be 39 years old, to be as active as she's been throughout the years. I mean, you can't overlook that, okay? She'll have a 2-inch reach advantage here. I think that Angela Hill will take this fight over as it progresses. I do. I think that Pinheiro may have an edge early on in this fight. Maybe we see Pinheiro come out guns a-blazing, just looking a little bit more crisp and sharp. One other avenue, maybe Pinheiro can use some of her judo skills. She has a black belt in judo and jiu-jitsu. If she wants to go the grappling route, that is something that can be used against Hill. But I could see Hill kind of weathering the storm there anyway, and then making a late push in this fight where maybe she could break Pinheiro late in this fight. And I do believe that is her husband here, I believe, right? Matthias Nicolau, who's coming off, I think you guys know what he's coming off of, a fight where he fought a horrible fight. And I'll tell you why real quick. It's because he didn't even try to use any type of grappling against a fighter who has struggled specifically early on with grappling against Alex Perez, which is such low fight IQ, man. You have such nasty jiu-jitsu. Try to get some scrambles going. Lock up a sub early on. We've seen Perez submitted early on in a lot of his fights. Instead, you do a kickboxing match as you're coming off a devastating knockout loss and your brain was just rattled. Yeah, do that with Perez. Anyways, so maybe you could question Pinheiro's fight IQ just based off the man she's married or dating or whatever. just poking some fun, if we're being honest. But hey, maybe we take that a little bit more serious than I'm giving off. Who knows? I don't know. So Angela Hill opened up as a -140. She's now a -133. The line closing a little bit. Doesn't surprise me at all. I think this is a fight where the line should be much closer. I think this fight should be almost nearing pick'em odds, in my opinion, with a very slight lean towards Angela Hill. I would definitely have Angela Hill being the slight favorite, if anything. I'm not really willing to have Pinheiro as a favorite in this spot, just because Hill's game, coming off another solid W, but it is a close fight. This fight can go either way. Whatever fighter's going to show up. If Pinheiro has her head on her shoulders, which I know I've been saying a lot in this video, but I like that term because that's really something that it's a big deal. These fighters, fighters show up mentally in different ways. You see it. It's not always just what physical abilities do you have, man. Some of these fighters show up different on certain fight nights, man. When these fighters are on and making intelligent decisions in the cage, it goes a long way. You guys know I'm always preaching about fight IQ. So if Pinheiro fights a smart fight, which I would like to see her trying to work in her judo and try to get some control time down on the mat and stuff like that, could be a problem for Angela Hill. If she wants to do a kickboxing match at range for 15 minutes, Angela Hill is very good at doing that. So give me Angela Hill to win a decision and to do what she does and just kind of outstrike her opponent and kind of go into cruise control, mixing up the Muay Thai skills. Adrian Yanez taking on Vinicius Salvador. This fight, fireworks written all over it. Stylistically, this is a great fight. Two fighters that really favor their boxing skills. I think they're going to trade, and I think we very likely could see somebody getting knocked out. And I think we'll get to the betting line in a second, but I think this fight is actually closer than some of you guys realize, just based on some things we're going to talk about here. So first and foremost, let's cut to the chase. Adrian Yanez, fighter that I interviewed a while back, was really a cool dude, man. We did a little MMA live discussion episode with him. Was really a nice dude. Came on, gave us the time of day. I will say this though, he definitely big timed me as he started to have a lot of success in the UFC. I shot him a couple of messages. Not that he owes me anything and is supposed to give me any type of time or whatever, but the thing I didn't like is that he's seen the messages and just never said anything back to me. You know, I was giving him a little congrats and some of his early wins in the UFC and whatnot, and it would be left unseen and not even a thanks or nothing like that. So again, I was just, shooting him some love just based on the fact that he gave me that time on that interview. I was always rooting him on. If you guys look at the intro to my YouTube channel here, that little intro video, which if anybody is good at doing intro videos and video editing, I really want to put together a much better intro, a long like a minute intro video to my channel. If anybody's good with that type of stuff, if you want to reach out to me, whether it's through email, IG, or Twitter. But I will say this, I had him in that video. I was really rooting him on throughout the early part of his UFC career, and I thought that he was a fighter that, at all the different fighters I've interviewed, and I've interviewed ex-UFC champions, I've interviewed some big names in the game, I thought he was one of the fighters that had the highest potential out of anyone that I had on the show to push it to a new limit and maybe become a champion. He had that type of potential as far as fighters that were never champions that were looking to become champions. Of course, like I said, I interviewed ex-champions and whatnot, but and I don't like the fact that he did that to me. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not really too caught up in it, but the fact that he did that makes me look at him in a little bit of a different regard. I'm sure he's just a busy dude, but if you have enough time to open up a message and you see someone showing you some love and just giving you some praise, how about a little yeah man, thanks man, or whatever, or appreciate you. But with that being said, as I vent there, just to give you some backstory to what I'm hoping to happen in this fight, I hope Vinicius Salvador lays him out. And you guys know Adrian Yanez is struggling right now. It's not just the two TKO knockout finishes that he's coming off of from Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez. Let's not forget what Randy Costa did to him in that fight. Randy Costa really put it on him in the first round. Eventually Yanez came back, but I do believe that Yanez has some major defensive flaws. He has some great offensive boxing tools, but it's like he's a little bit too comfortable in range as he's looking to land his setup, his counters and whatnot. It's like he feels comfortable that he's going to be just a little bit out of range and he can counter you with some of his hooks and whatnot and his beautiful boxing. He works the body and all that. And this game is a game of inches, especially with these 4-ounce gloves. And Vinicius Salvador throws some nasty, wild hooks. He's more sloppy with his boxing, but he's dangerous. Throws some nasty step-in knees. And I think that Vinicius Salvador is live to get a TKO knockout finish in this fight. He's just 27 years old, has a good amount of experience already. Does have some questionable losses throughout his career, but he's young and he could start to elevate his game potentially. He's coming in off some losses. He has his back up against the wall as well. Losses to Victor Altamirano and CJ Vergara. Shows to have some low fighter IQ too in his fights, which is why I'm not able to pick him in this spot, although I want to pick him so bad, but I am stating there's a very likelihood, a great chance that Salvador does get a knockout in this fight. Okay, I'm letting you know that. So I think the line's off as we're going to slide over to now. At the end of the day, I have to pick Yanez because Yanez is just a more proven fighter. He's more polished. There's too many questionable performances from Salvador, losing to lower level fighters that are lower at a lower weight class, and just Yanez is a proven bantamweight fighter who's you got to think that he's coming into this fight fully prepared, knowing he needs a W here, and I just think he's the more proven and more polished fighter, and I think it's even more likely that Yanez lands that knockout, but it's going to be a dangerous firefight. Also, maybe Yanez dives into the toolbox and uses some different tools in his arsenal. Maybe he mixes things up a little bit more. So Yanez is heavy on that front leg too, and I'm not as worried. Vinicius Salvador hasn't really shown me anything with his leg kicks. I'm not too worried about that. I don't see a repeat performance from the Martinez fight against Yanez here. So yeah, I have Adrian Yanez to win this fight. I think that they go to war. Someone gets knocked out, and I wouldn't be surprised if Salvador gets the knockout as well. I'm just going to say that one more time, but I will pick Yanez. You guys, we are powered by BetUS. Don't forget, sign up through the link in the description of this video. Get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. No one's doing the deposit match there, the bonuses, like BetUS. Another fighter on this card coming in off quite a layoff. Over 2 years was the last time Ramiz Brahimaj was in the cage. He's now taking on Themba Gorimbo, who is coming off a phenomenal victory, although it was against Pete Rodrigues, a fighter that is very unproven, although he shows flashes of being dangerous in his own regard, but still very limited amount of fights to go off of. But the way Themba cracked him with that shot was phenomenal. And before that, had the victory over Takashi Sato, the longtime veteran. In his UFC debut, takes a loss to AJ Fletcher. That was a fun fight. A lot of back and forth with the grappling transitions and whatnot. And eventually, Themba made a mistake. He was cracked by Fletcher, clubbed and subbed. He was cracked and then put in that guillotine choke. So just note, we have seen him subbed in half of his losses. Ramiz is a fighter that has some serious grappling skills. In fact, you take a look at his 10 victories. All 10 of his victories are via submission. As of recently, subbed Michael Gilmore, fighter that came off the Ultimate Fighter, a lower level fighter. Submitted my boy, Sasha Palatnikov. Shout out to Sasha, who's a very dangerous striker, but not necessarily known for his grappling. But he was able to go the grappling route against Sasha there. There's some scattered losses. A loss to Court McGee, a loss to Max Griffin in the Griffin fight. Remember, his ear was hanging off his head, but make no mistake, before the stoppage due to the injury, Max Griffin was getting the better of that fight and was en route to getting a W there. So if maybe Themba can replicate some of what Max Griffin did in that fight, and I know that Themba is a fighter that has grappling skills as well, which 5 of his 12 victories have come by sub, and he's shown some submission skills. I think that I kind of want to see him actually go the striking route here. I like his wiry frame. I like his athleticism on the feet. He'll have, I think, about a 4-inch reach advantage here. And although Ramiz is technical with his striking, he's a technical fighter fighting out of Fortis MMA. I do like his technical ability. Doesn't put a lot of volume out there. He kind of sits back and waits for these like crisp counters. But I think that Themba, if he plays a smart fight with his speed and whatnot, can kind of out volume him there. But Themba seems to always kind of mix in the grappling as well. He does fancy mixing in the grappling, but needs to be a little bit careful there because Brahimaj has some serious BJJ skills. It's a close fight. I like this fight a lot. I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out. Although Ramiz has been out of the cage for some time, just 31 years old, we got to kind of wonder what's been going on with him. And I know he's had some personal things go on outside the cage before. I think he had to have surgery. He had some type of tumor or something like that. I know that's why there was some stuff that went on with him early in his UFC career or something. He had some type of surgery with his eyes and just had some issues and whatnot. So, but in the meantime, Themba has been getting some momentum going on in the cage, and I want to be on the Themba side here. I like that 5-inch reach advantage that he has, and I like the confidence that he has coming into this fight. You saw it after the last victory that he had. We talked about the Pete Rodrigues knockout. He has been talking about, if I remember correctly what he said, I mean, he feels he's the best in the world at this division. He feels he could take out anybody. He's very confident in his overall skill set, and I like that. Okay, I like that. And I think that he's cruising into the prime of his career. So you have a more primed fighter with a lot of confidence coming into a fight against a fighter that has shown, let me reiterate, the fight against Max Griffin has shown to have some issues, I think, in his confidence. Because in that Griffin fight, he definitely had some jitters in that fight. He had some octagon jitters in that fight. He was very hesitant in that fight. And if Themba comes out, pushes the pace in him, I think that he kind of bullies this fight a little bit. So, I'm on the Themba side right now. Themba opened up as a -140 on BetUS, hits -145, and then goes back to a -135, action going the other way. And I think that people are a little bit worried about the grappling exchanges. I think people think that there's going to be some of those exchanges taking place in the cage, and I think that people think Ramiz Brahimaj is going to get the better of those exchanges. I don't know. I think I will side with Themba here, though. I like Themba, and Themba, does he find a finish in this fight? I think that he may be more likely to get a decision victory here. He's a dangerous fighter, but I think that maybe he kind of just out-volumes Ramiz. Maybe Ramiz has his moments as well, but maybe we do see this fight go to a decision. I'll take Themba via decision here. We've never seen Brahimaj subbed. He's been knocked out once. That was due to that ear that kind of got ripped off. We've never really seen him starch. We've never seen the chin too damaged. Give me Themba via decision. In the welterweight division, we got Chaos Williams taking on Carlston Harris. Harris coming off a big-time victory, a much-needed victory, where he was able to catch Jeremiah Wells in that sub. That was an anaconda choke that he pulled off, and he actually raves about his skills with that anaconda choke. He believes he has one of the best anaconda chokes in the game, has very long limbs to make that work. Gotta love the durability and the heart of Harris, because that was a fight that he was getting bullied around in towards the beginning of that fight, and was just never down on himself. Continued to hang in there, and eventually got the sub in the third round. So he's game. He's game without a doubt. Now, Chaos Williams is a fighter that's definitely game as well. I think that Williams is going to have the striking advantage here. He'll have the power advantage as they're kind of trading on the feet. I definitely would favor Chaos there. Where the gap maybe closes a little bit is if Harris can somehow get this fight down to the mat. If we could see this fight kind of just be mixing up in all aspects of MMA, maybe Harris can try to find that anaconda choke or use some type of grappling skills to have an edge here. But I don't think that will necessarily be that easy. Be that easy for him. Williams has shown he has pretty good takedown defense, showcasing an 80% takedown defensive rate in the cage. He has good footwork. He's a good athlete. And the way I see this fight playing out, it's kind of similar to the Jeremiah Wells fight. I think that Chaos is going to kind of dictate this fight on the feet. It's going to kind of bully the fight a little bit. It really is going to come down to how is Chaos going to look in the later rounds, and also does this fight end up turning out to be kind of a dog fight, which I can see this fight turning out to be that type of fight, and then Harris will have moments to try to capitalize on that. If you remember the Randy Brown fight, that was a fight that I thought Chaos Williams won that fight. Many did as well, but it was a close fight. But that was a fight that they were really going at it, and Randy Brown had some moments where he landed some big strikes as well. And if this fight gets ugly, Harris he's a good fighter, man. He's a good fighter. So Harris will have his chances as well. All in all, though, like I said, I do favor being on the Chaos Williams side of things here. And I think that if he could slow the pace down in this fight, I actually would prefer that. And I think that he would just be a step ahead, and he can kind of cruise his way into a victory here if he doesn't land a big knockout strike ahead of time, because he has that type of fight ending power as well. Let me also just note that real quick. Knockout victory over Miguel Baeza, knockout victory over Abdul Razak Al Hassan, the knockout over Alex Morono in the first round in his UFC debut within 27 seconds. And Alex Morono, a perennial underrated fighter. The dude is just, people overlook him quite often, and that's a big victory there. So don't forget that KS can end this fight early on. Okay, so I am on Chaos Williams to get the job done here. I could see him getting that knockout. And let me also note, we've seen Harris knocked out before. We've seen the chin tested, was knocked out by Shavkat Rakhmonov in the first round in his UFC, it wasn't his UFC debut. Sorry about that. That was actually after he had 2 victories in the cage, and also had a finish over Impa Kasengane. Definitely worth noting. That's right. So then eventually was finished up by Shavkat. I think he was hit with like a wheel kick or something wild like that too. So, I think Chaos Williams can keep it more simple and land a fight-ending shot there as well. But I am on the Chaos Williams side of things. I think he can find a knockout in this fight, even early on, or specifically early on. Later in the fight is where I think Harris can start to close the gap. But give me Chaos Williams via TKO. We'll take a TKO victory, maybe a first or second round TKO there. So Chaos Williams opens up as a -135. He's now -130. So the line kind of going the other way here, minusculely. Is that another word I'm making up? Making up a couple words here as we go. Minusculely. That could actually be a legit word there. But with a close line like this, I definitely feel the value is on KS. I feel better being on the Chaos side of things. Even if this line even went back the other way, I have this line capped more like KS Williams at -160. All right, so kind of showing you how I feel about this fight here. I think KS is game. Just 30 years old. I know he hasn't been extremely active, but this dude is entering the prime of his career. He's a game fighter. Carlson, 36 years old, getting a little bit up there in age as well. So I like Chaos Williams to get the job done. Hey guys, real quick, if you're looking to work with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out to me. It could be through email, Instagram, or Twitter. Shoot me a message, and I will give you some further information. Like in this card, I'm going to capitalize and hit on this one. Let's go. Here we go. We're at the main event. Edson Barboza taking on Lerone Murphy. Barboza, one of the legends of the fight game, one of the greatest strikers to have ever stepped into the cage. A fighter that has some of the most spectacular knockout victories that we've ever seen. I always like to bring up that knockout victory that he had over Terry Edom. Was at the bar with the boys, man. That was one of the craziest moments, even though it wasn't like a huge fight like a Conor McGregor knockout over Aldo, but I would say when that knockout hit, for whatever reason, that night with the boys, that was one of the craziest moments watching the fights ever, man. People were going nuts at the Brews Room in South Florida there for that one. Spectacular knockout. I have that in my top 5 knockouts of all time, most likely. He's 38 years old now. He's coming off a phenomenal performance over Sadiq Yusuff, where he weathered the storm, dug deep, and dragged Sadiq into the late rounds, into the deep waters, and took over that fight. Showcasing another attribute that he has. Yeah, he is a spectacular striker, but he's a lot more than that. This is a fighter that has one of the biggest hearts in the game. He's a durable fighter. He could take a lot of damage, and he's just never down and out. The fact that he's 38 years old and looks to be in the shape that he's in even now, has been working on his craft over at American Top Team for so long, that says it all about this dude. I mean, he's a true pro, and you have to know that going into this fight that he's going to be fully prepared to do anything to get the job done here. You know that he's turned over every stone. His cardio is going to be up to par and past par. He's going to be in great shape. He's going to be the more proven fighter when this fight goes to the later rounds. There's no question about that, right? I mean, when this fight enters the later rounds, he's the more proven fighter. If you want to take, well, real quick, we mentioned the Sadiq victory. How about the beautiful knee he caught Billy with, as Billy was shooting for a takedown, I believe, right? He countered him with that beautiful time knee. Keep an eye on that. If Murphy wants to go the grappling route, which I expect him to be changing levels throughout this fight, Murphy's a pretty well-rounded fighter. It's going to be dangerous when you're entering. No, Bryce Mitchell kind of had his way with Barboza, but Mitchell is I think that Mitchell has some of the more underrated grappling in the game. He was knocked out by Giga Chikadze, a dangerous striker. Before that, went to war with Shane Burgos, once again showcasing that heart, got the knockout over Burgos in the third round there. Victory over Makwan Americani. You take a look at his losses too against respectable opponents. I thought that he had a W against Paul Felder in the latter of their fights there as well. I thought he should have won that fight. So, I mean, Barboza's still doing his thing. I think you guys know where I'm going with my decision here. I mean, Murphy, let me kind of just mention Murphy a little bit here. I don't want to completely overlook him. He's on a nice little winning streak here. But listen, went to a draw against Tukigov in his debut. That fight was over in Abu Dhabi, I believe, and that was a weird fight. But knocks out Ricardo Ramos. Victory over Douglas Silva de Andrade. Now listen, the Gabriel Santos fight, I thought that Santos won that fight, which is, you guys have heard me say, I feel that Santos has had a really tough beginning to his UFC career because he should have had that victory over Murphy in that fight, and then he made a mental mistake in that fight against that was the fight against David Onama, where he got shot up with the arrows after the fight. He was winning that fight, got a little crazy. So, there's just a little bit of an asterisk there for me. But the Koulibaly victory was a big one. Koulibaly is a fighter I hold in high regard. Murphy's a phenomenal athlete, very fast, very well-rounded. He has the youth going for him, 32 compared to Barboza's 38. Way less miles on him. Barboza, man, this guy has 35 professional fights compared to the 14 of Murphy. Murphy's going to be way fresher. But like I said, I think you guys knew where I was going to go with this, man. I'm going to take Barboza in this fight. A 5-rounder. As long as Barboza doesn't get clipped and these guys start to go to war, I could see Barboza taking over in the later rounds. Also, I mean, look at the shape he's in. Dude, this is him at 38, man. This guy obviously takes very good care of himself. This isn't your typical 38-year-old. And I think that we've actually been seeing over the past couple years, man, we're starting to see these fighters have a longer longevity in the fight. Some of these fighters are looking phenomenal late in age. We're seeing it more and more, man. So don't be so quick to fade some of these fighters that are getting older. I know I've done that often with certain fighters, maybe more than others, but not with a fighter like Barboza, man. This guy, just look at the shape he's in, man. And I think he's going to be ready to go. I like the fight experience that he has, and I think he can use some of the tools that he has in his arsenal to sneak out an underdog victory in the main event here. And obviously what Barboza is looking to do is make one more run at this title, right? I mean, he's 38 years old. Maybe not. Maybe he just is still fighting for his enjoyment. But you got to kind of wonder, is he looking to make one more run, right? That's what he's trying to do, make one more run. If he wins this fight, he will be on a 3-fight winning streak. And it'll be huge for him. And obviously the UFC will continue to bless him with some big fight opportunities because he's paid his dues, okay? Right now, Murphy, he opened up as a -150. Right now, he is a -140. So the gap closing a little bit. And I think that's what should be happening. I think this line should be closer than that. I like the value on Barboza. Now, it may not play out like that. And Murphy may go out there and hurt him early and finish him up. It may look phenomenal. There is a possibility that can happen. But if he doesn't, and this fight goes to the later rounds, Barboza can have a lot of success here. Again, also Barboza, a phenomenal striker. He should be able to hang there, and this should be a fight that plays out very entertainingly, one way or another. I expect this to be a fun fight, and I want to be on the legend side here. I want to be on the side with the legend and Barboza, and I think there's more value on his line, and we'll see how it plays out. But give me Edson Barboza in the main event, and does he get a late finish? Maybe he gets a late finish. But I'll say more so Barboza takes over the fight late and wins a decision. Maybe sneaks a close fight decision. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Vegas 92, Barboza versus Murphy. I want to give you guys a thank you. I want to give you guys a special thank you for those of you guys that tuned in throughout this whole video. It means a lot to me. Very much appreciate you guys. I hope you guys all have a profitable event. Remember, you can keep up to date with me on a day-to-day basis on my Instagram and my Twitter. You see it posted below. And I got to leave you guys with some parting words. Give you guys more of some simple parting words, but something I was thinking of. And obviously, I need to start stepping up in the gym a little bit. I'm about to start making a little resurgence in the gym, but and I know a lot of you guys have heard this before, and this is kind of common knowledge, but think about it and just kind of really understand it. When you guys are working out, for you weightlifters out there, make sure when you're hitting your weights, you'll notice you'll get a major difference in results when you're not just tossing the weights around quickly. Remember, man, say for example you're doing a curl, you should have a good amount of time within your rep. So when you're going up, go up nice and slow. But even more importantly, or just as importantly, when you're going down, when you're retracting, go down nice and slow. You're working a different part of your muscle. And what you'll notice is, for those of you guys that don't have a lot of weights to toss around, even if you have a limited amount of weights in your garage or a gym that has lighter weights, you can get a crazy pump even from those small weights. Okay, all right. Even if you're going nice and slow with the weights, you're going to notice that 30 pound is just as strenuous as you guys tossing around those 50 pounds when you're just jerking around, swinging them around. So try that out, I'm telling you, and you guys will see major results in the mirror. All right, guys. Teller always hitting you guys up with the words of wisdom here. All right, guys. On that note, signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.